Brittany, take it off.
And while you're sharing, I'm reading where we have Boston, Whidbey Island, Canada, Texas, Seattle. So far, I'm seeing a lot of US folks. Well, the timing is kind of 4:30, like that's not India.
We had someone from Canada as well.
Yeah, we have Canada and Florida.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I don't know if Tatiana covered that. For InnovateQA, we already have speakers from Australia and Canada who will be traveling on their own and speaking on some of the topics, which would be like really good to see.
Yeah, so our speakers list is pretty much full, guys. Check it out on the website. We'll publish the schedule soon. So no more speaker applications for us. All right, Brittany, it's all yours now.
All right. Thank you, Tatiana. Hi, everyone. I've been waiting to say hi. I didn't want to start talking until it was my turn on the floor. During this presentation, as I'm speaking, you'll see me look to the left or right. I just have 2 monitors. I want to see you guys. So I'm looking at your faces over here and slides are here, okay? All right, so I think we already did the check-in in terms of audio and visual, so I should be good to go.
Yes, you're good.
Thank you. So I'm Brittany Stewart, and today we're going to be tackling one of the biggest challenges that is happening in modern QA, which is balancing shift left and shift right. I want to start with something interesting. Moving to the next slide, which is this statistic coming from the InnovateQA team. Thank you, guys. They shared this poll a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn asking which approach wins, shift left or shift right. And I found it interesting that 77% of the QA professionals believe that, both. I am also interested in learning more about the ones who selected only shift right, but if time allows, we can discuss that at the end. So with these statistics in mind, I know that it can be, or how should I say this, just knowing the tool and that this is what you need to have a good process is really just the beginning of it. The real question comes to how. So my plan is over the next 25 to 30 minutes, hopefully I finish in time, we'll be able to, I'll be sharing some practical frameworks with you and some strategies based on my experience across various projects. And don't worry, these slides and the resources that I'll mention today will be shared after. So let's get started. Before I begin formally, for those of you who don't know me, a quick introduction. So I am born, raised, and living in Kingston, Jamaica, a small Caribbean island. My background is interesting too. I came from a design and business background. So I had a interior decorating and graphic design company here in Jamaica, and I transitioned into tech in 2017. So I've been working in tech for the last 7 years with a focus on QA process improvement, doing test automation, and most recently getting into AI and testing. And I've worked with companies like Conabus Inc. That's my most recent company, but I really spent majority of my time with QualityWorks. And with them over the years, I've managed to work with clients across various industries, including e-commerce, the fintech industry, and edtech. So I'll be making reference to some of those today. Additionally, some notable achievements that I want to share is I've been a speaker before at Test Bash World, that's from the Ministry of Testing, for those of you who are familiar with it. And also I did Sauce Lab SauceCon in 2021. The one that I'm most proud of is actually being named Top 100 Women in Tech to Follow and Learn From by Agile Testing Days. So thank you for showing up. It says to me that I am doing something right in terms of sharing my knowledge in this area. Outside of work, I'm a mom to a 7-year-old son, and I live here with my husband. And outside of my everyday work stuff, I do like to spend my time with my family at the beach or at a river. And yes, I still do design these days, but not on such a big scale that I used to do it before. For those of you who want to connect with me, I did put my LinkedIn URL in the chat, but you can also search it here. There is the link, and then you can check out my blog at brittanystewart.tech. So we can connect after this session. Okay, let's go into the main points. So today's main discussion points are going to be around us covering practical ways to balance both approaches. And we'll look at how automation strengthens these approaches. And then I'll share some decision-making frameworks that I've used to help me figure out if I'm balancing right on the projects. So I'll put a link in the chat to these downloadable frameworks when we finish at the end. I don't want to really distract anybody now. But let's start with the overall or the overview of what shift right and shift left is with some clear definitions. And maybe I can slow down a bit. I realize I might be going a bit fast. Tatiana, am I good in terms of?
You're good.
Okay, thank you.
You're good.
All right. Okay, so let's start with this image. I think it's a good representation of what shift left and shift right mean because it shows us the level of effort and resources across the development cycle. So clearly we can see here that shift left moves testing earlier and the resources earlier in the development cycle. And it's a very proactive approach that really focuses on, are we catching the bugs? Are we fixing them early in the process? While shift right is on the other end and it extends into production. So everything post deployment. It focuses on, are we monitoring the user experience? Are we gathering data? The real question that I like to ask myself when I think about this one is, are we delivering value to the end users? And then in the middle, we have the traditional, testing phase, which is just by itself, but we don't really do that anymore. But why I share this visual with you today is because it shows how both approaches contribute to continuous quality at the bottom. And I believe that continuous quality is, in modern development, is really the best way for us to go. So based on my experience, there can be challenges around implementing continuous quality, things like not having enough QA resources or QA resources with the right skills, as well as some cultural barriers which I've experienced, such as having the teams being isolated, and then the challenge of a traditional mindset in the organization. So we have to overcome those. I'm sure some of you have been there or either are there right now, which is why we're having this conversation. So I'm very excited to touch on it. So that's just basics, setting the foundation. Now I'm going to go right into the practical steps. This slide shows a combination of shift left and shift right actions, but this is based on my cheat sheet that I created, and it's out there on LinkedIn and on the blog, but it's based on experiences plus research that I've done. So I'm going to walk through it quickly, high level. This is just one part of the cheat sheet that I think we can focus on for today. On the left side, we've got the shift left goals and actions. So actions for me in this case are organized by the 3 goals, and these goals were specific to the project that I was on. So if you're trying to do something like this, I think you might need to change the context because it would be different to your specific team or the specific project that you're working on. But I think it does give us a good starting point, which is why I created this. Now, for the first goal on one of the teams that I was on, we wanted to make sure we were improving test efficiency, which basically meant catching issues early before they got into the code. And we did this, these actions to follow that were doing things like joining the requirement sessions, creating the test scenarios during planning, setting up basic automated smoke tests, and using the requirements checklist. The other goal is cutting defect leakage by whatever percentage. I took out the percentages because, like I said, that will vary. But this is focused on, are we stopping the bugs from escaping? And so the next action for that would be building on automation and doing that during the development phase, which would include things like doing peer testing with the devs to create unit tests, creating an automated acceptance test tool, and then setting up a quality or the quality gates in the CI/CD pipelines. And then for the final goal that I had here, achieving defect prevention, is more optimizing on the strategy that was just mentioned. So we would expand automation coverage, switch focus to strengthening the peer testing sessions, enhance the unit tests and acceptance tests, and based on the feedback, refine the quality gates and metrics that we have in place. Now, on the right side is shift right testing in production. And so this one I did in it was organized by phases instead. So I wanted to break it down to say to a QA person, you know, how do you start? Well, this is the foundation for shifting right. So we would set up basic automation, as you see here, define critical user journeys, and then you establish some baseline metrics. Once you do that, then you move into implementing, you know, feature flags depending on your application, and then you can try to support the canary releases, set up configurations and alerts. And as you proceed, and maybe I don't need to go through all of them, but as you proceed through the phases, you see it gets more advanced. You add in A/B testing, then you monitor production, you focus on performance analysis, and you get to focus more on the non-functional tests in the production environment as you advance through these phases. Finally, in this phase, yeah, you do optimize, so you can, and I haven't done this one, so I should call that out in terms of automating canary analysis, but I did the research and found out that that's the next step. And you make sure to integrate those into CI/CD, and then you automate the feedback loop. So this, I'm trying to represent the continuous quality cycle here. And what makes it powerful is the cycle between left and right, so that continuous movement. To summarize though, this slide is insights that come from the phases that are implemented in the shift right section. They feed directly into early testing and the continuous improvement loop. I'm sorry, somebody was saying something. Did you have was that for me?
There's someone in the room, I think.
Oh, okay.
We'll mute ourselves.
Okay, no problem. All right.
We'll not say anything. See, can you hear us?
Yeah, so change.
Yeah. Oh, can you guys hear me still?
We can hear you. We'll try to mute the room. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, hi, Milan. All right, cool. Let's continue. So at the heart of this continuous cycle that I've outlined here, I believe is holistic testing, because that was the thing that made the biggest change for me when I was doing it. So I'll give you a quick intro to what holistic testing is, or the collaborative testing loop. So this one, oh.
Brittany, there was a request for the slides because it's hard to see the small text on the slides.
Okay.
Is there a link you can give people, maybe?
Let me see if I can quickly create a production live link. Yes, 1 second. I'm sorry, guys. That's why I think I would provide the details for it in the chat after too. Let me know.
No problem. I just am curious, so I
to read.
like don't slow down on my account. But thank you, Brittany. I'll follow up.
Okay, cool, no problem. Let me know if that works.
I don't think so.
No. It joined the
Well,
live.
let's just go ahead and then we'll share it at the end.
Okay. All right, John. Hopefully we can do that at the end. Yeah, I'll drop the links to the resources.
Yeah. No problem. I'll just listen to your narrative and follow up later.
Okay, thank you. All right, guys. Oh yeah, let me try that. Let me try zooming in. But I didn't also. No, it's gonna cut
There you go.
words.
Yeah, that's better.
That's better?
Much better.
I think that's better.
Oh yeah, do that again.
Yeah.
This one is very
Yeah, that's
There you
good.
go.
That's good.
Perfect. That's much better.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay. All
Old
right.
people
So
like
this,
me.
no, it's fine. And this is a little blurry. I included
It's all
it
right.
not with the intention of like pointing
Yeah.
the details, but yeah. All right. So let's continue. So as I was saying, I believe holistic testing is really what drives the balance between both. And this diagram is a representation from Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory that I won't go into the details of it, as I said, but I'll just call out that on the left side here is the loop that's showing us that we can do testing early, and how it's through the planning, the discovering, the understanding, and the building. But then that does feed into the right side of the loop, which is the shift right part of it. And this is focused on, us finding the bugs and learning more. So that's the deploy, the release, observe, and the learn. But it creates this continuous loop of quality, and that's what we're trying to get to with shift right and shift left. What's special about it to me, though, is that it involves the whole team approach, and I think that's very important. It involves the product organization from business operations to UX and straight to the customers. So it does that by emphasizing, multiple perspectives in the organization, not just one. So that's a basic definition of holistic testing in a nutshell. I've included the link in the slides for this, so you can do some more research on it too. But I want to go into sharing a real world example with you of how it worked on a project that I was a part of. In other words, it's like, what does good look like, right? So we'll call this project, by the way, am I zoomed in enough? Or do I?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, cool. I created this one, so the fonts are bigger. All right, cool. So we'll call this project the Good E-commerce Project. And I joined this team back in 2021 as a QA engineer. It was a major e-commerce platform that had 30 million monthly visitors, and the company itself had 20 plus years of industry reputation to maintain. So it was a critical project. The team that I was on at the time, they had come in before I did into the organization, but they had laid like a good foundation. They did the assessments, they helped to identify the gaps. And so when I went in, I didn't have to do that part, so I had the information to work with. Some of the challenges that were brought out early when we started this project were that they had things that included, or challenges that included things like incomplete requirements. There was poor visibility from the stakeholder perspective into quality. They had a high tech debt ratio, and then manual testing just wasn't keeping up pace with the modern development practices that they had in place. What struck me about this project was how different it felt compared to previous ones that I had been on, in that it felt very safe and calm. I'll tell you more why. So for the shift left side of things, when I was on the project, my everyday included doing things that got me involved early in the requirements. And what that looked like was I was creating behavior-driven tests, so the BDD test scenarios with our PM and the devs during planning meetings. We implemented the use of requirement checklists to standardize expectations between the team and the business. In terms of efficient automation, I think this is very important, and it's important to me too, because this was my first time seeing it live, was pairing directly with the developers to create the unit test and have them mapped directly from the app to the areas of impact. And then we worked with the team to integrate all of this in the CI/CD pipeline. These tests that were created had unique pass and fail criteria attached to them. And I specifically remember that we had automated tests for the QA environment and some production sanity tests in place, which they were set up to run every morning at 5 a.m. before the day started. And we would get Slack alerts if the test runs, the rates dropped below 95 to 98%, for example. This approach with early test automation, it helped us tremendously. I think the alerts that were in place were very important. So if anything went wrong, like if the pass rates fell below the threshold that I mentioned we set, then we would get a major alert on the Slack channel. But we also had an incident management protocol in place. So we would jump on a call, investigate the issues together, and it just felt safe. Like we had a safety net in place in case anything went wrong. So to segue into the right side, which is a shift right side, based on my experience, I do think shift left is easier to implement. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that. I think shift right might be harder or more difficult because it requires, one, more technical skills and setup. And then two, it requires that cultural or the culture of collaboration across departments, not just within development teams. So thank you. I want to hear that why, but John, I'll come to you closer to the end. Oh, and I see some other questions. I'll come to the questions. I think it's best if I come to them on the end. Okay, so keep putting them in the chat. We'll get to them. All right, so on this e-commerce project, I had the opportunity to work very closely with the designers, marketing, customer support teams. And I believe that in terms of collaboration, this made a big difference. So I was able to work with them to encourage implementing feature flags early in the process. And those feature flags helped releases move faster and they felt safer. We had more confidence in release. I know sometimes the counter argument for like feature flags is we can have too many. And I was able to manage the amount of feature flags that we had in place by using a visualization technique and mind mapping. So just to lay out how many feature flags we were and what the impact areas were. And it helped us to assess coverage. But anyways, I won't go into too much of that part because we're going to talk some more about visualization. One of the most valuable experiences I had with this project was the data visualization tools. They had set up Grafana dashboards, which showed us performance data. And this was accessible to the entire team, which was new for me. Usually there is like, oh no, QA can't go in production. But this team was like, no, here are the metrics, you can use this. So what I did, it gave us full visibility into the website performance metrics, yes, but there were some other important data points that the senior devs and the engineers had set up. I didn't set this part up, but it was insightful for me to see, like, how was production environment performing on this particular page, and stuff like that. We also had alerts in place in case anything went wrong. So again, the monitoring of production was very important using that tool. I think too, the emphasis that we were allowed with the shift right perspective on this project. So we were able to even talk about performance tests and some of the more non-functional testing types like security testing, which from previous projects, those were placed on the back burner. The other thing that stuck with me from this experience was partnering with the marketing team and the design team directly. So they used a technique called heat map analysis, and they did this through a tool called Hotjar. When I met with them in our calls, we were able to see actual user behavior on the screen in production for what was going on in production, and we could see where they spent the most time. So I was looking at things like which page did they spend the most time and which areas. From a marketing standpoint, they were focused on like sales, but I was focused on the user journeys, and this provided a lot of information to guide the testing. So summarizing all of that to say that the data and the monitoring insights that we got from production were very important. I took all of that data, fed it into the test to make sure that we were covering what really mattered to the business. And it did feed into the risk-based testing approach that we had in place. So it helped us to remain, relevant and impactful with our tests. But over the course of the project, which was about a year, we were going into year 2, the outcome that we had by combining the shift left and shift right strategies led to us having fewer defects in production. We had the faster delivery time to production as well. And customer satisfaction had increased because there were less bugs. And from an internal standpoint, the team morale was more, it increased, and my confidence as a QA had also increased. So I was very happy because the environments before had been a bit more high pressure, high stress, with getting things out, bugs at the last minute. But with this kind of approach, it felt proactive, it felt safe, it felt like more controlled, and it's one that I'll never forget. So I'm happy to share it with you today. A quick tip that I wanted to call out on this slide is about shift right testing, because I hear people talk about getting analytics from like Google Analytics or analytics on browsers and devices. But this experience showed me that we could look at more things like the actual user journeys. We could look at the performance metrics. We could look at customer support, trending tickets, and even the recorded demo sessions for the stakeholders to get feedback on how is the application performing out there in production. Okay, so that's it for story time. I'm going to go back into the practical, which is us finding the balance. So I created this slide to summarize everything that I shared in the story before. So this would be your reference guide. The good e-commerce example had elements of shift left, which included these things that I mentioned, and even PR reviews. I don't think I mentioned that before. And then it included the elements of shift right, data visualization, the alerts, feature flags. But in terms of balancing both, as I said, I really think it was the holistic testing that worked, as well as data-driven feedback loops and the cross-team collaboration. Are we there yet? I named it this slide because I think one of the first steps towards us balancing or finding that balance is to assess where we are now. And I shared this with Tatiana before. She called it the secret, like almost a secret sauce. It's a simple finding a balance checklist or assessment that I created using the cheat sheet actions and the phases from earlier. And this was the type of assessment that I did to actually help me identify which project to share with you guys today as a good case study. So on the this side, the first image, it shows a breakdown of this good e-commerce project in terms of scores for shift left and shift right. So you see they had 100% for shift left based on the practices that we outlined. But in shift right, we had some more that we could do, like the automating of the canary analysis. Didn't get to that, hoping I can do that sometime in the future. And then on the other side, image 2 is the actual comparison across various projects. So this one was just for shift left. So you see an e-commerce project and it got 100%, meaning it was operating well within shift left. There were other projects that were, trending towards it, but they needed improvement. Okay. So I'm sharing this with you guys today, not as this is a go-to thing, but more as an idea of how you can measure your current state and then track it towards a more balanced approach to testing. I believe visibility is very important, so this should help with that. I'm curious to know if you guys have any other references or ways of assessing this too. So if you do, please share your references in the chat. And one more note to call out about this slide is I did read Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory's assessment, the QPAM assessment, before I created this tool. So that's a good resource as well. It will be included in the links at the end. If you'd like to try this assessment though, just send me a message or email me and I can share the template with you. Okay. Another way to decide, so in terms of choosing between both, I've been working on this. Okay, so this is hard to see for sure. I know it is. But I didn't create it to go in detail. But what I was thinking is using this decision tree to help us decide which approach to focus on, because depending on the project that you're on, it's going to vary. Every team is at a different place. So sometimes you have to gauge factors like, what kind of project are you on? Is it high risk for production failures? For example, if you're in healthcare or fintech, the production failure or the risk of production failure is much higher. So you might want to shift left more initially in terms of making the change. But for the good e-commerce project, for example, it was more low risk, so we could focus more in the middle. So these were just really some guiding points of questions to ask yourself. I have them over here too. So what's the risk? Do you have enough people? Do you have the right skill sets to even do automation and set up what's in production for monitoring? Is real user validation important to your team? Because for some teams, that's not a priority. So this, just a general reference. If you guys are interested in this one too, you can message me and I'll share it, the template. And we are at the end. So just to summarize the key takeaways, I think from what I presented today, is when it comes to balancing shift left and shift right, we should be embracing both is what it comes down to. If we want to remain relevant and have a positive impact on our teams, we need to be assessing first, make it visible, assess your current state to see where you are. Then you need to use the holistic testing approach, which allows us to consider all perspectives on the left and on the right. When to start is you start early during the requirements phase. As it relates to team like prioritization, I want to say, we would focus on the critical user journeys first. So that would give us quick feedback, and then it relates directly to the end user satisfaction results, which are usually what's most important for the businesses. In terms of us extending or bringing testing expertise to production, I'm just encouraging people not to feel like you need to stay behind the scenes. You can extend the testing skills into the post-deployment processes, and then use automation as a safety net. Don't try to use it for everything, but it's good to have in place, and you integrate that into the CI/CD pipeline. Most importantly, at the end is the feedback loop. So use the production data insights that you receive to improve testing and keep growing. I want to thank you for allowing me to present this information to you today, and I'll share the links to the cheat sheets and the reference to this slide in the chat shortly. But I'm happy to answer any questions now.
Thank you, Brittany, for such a great presentation. I love how structured and organized your approach is, and I think the checklists are just amazing. It makes it so clear. Hey, here is your options, basically, right? And you can choose some of them. So we had some questions in chat, and if you guys comfortable, feel free to unmute yourself and just speak up and ask your question if it haven't been answered yet. And we'll take questions online and in the room.
There were some in the chat.
I can read them. I can read the questions. So if the team has limited resources, then what is the better direction to go?
In my experience, it's been shift left, which is why I think it's easier. I've been able to implement this much quicker on projects. So I would have to lean that way, and then you have to work on that cultural aspect to get into the shift right side.
I think it kind of depends on what kind of product it is. If you are in a backend only team, which only writes APIs, like there is full value on going on the left side. But if there is a lot of user end portals, mobile app.
If there is a business, business
front-facing business, right? Yeah.
So shifting right implementing shifting right tools brings a lot of value to the business.
Correct.
And we are like a second level customer, engineering customer.
Yeah,
of that
or
business.
basically the QA development teams are the first customer. So having a look on the UI, I mean, not do everything on the production, but pre-prod or something would make more sense. And I think you're right, Brittany, like it's a balancing act. Like the word I think you use is very accurate. It's a balancing act based upon which company, which product, what is the stage of your company and how much they want to invest it. With all these factors, I think your checklist definitely would help over there to decide where to invest more. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you guys on that. It is very context specific, and that was something that I was struggling with coming in, but I realized, this is a space for us to have those kind of discussions depending on which project you have and what your team size is. So thanks for that. I'm trying to get the links for you guys in the chat.
There was the whole discussion in chat of which shift left or shift harder to implement. And so some people said shift left is harder, some people said shift right is harder. Anyone wants to share their opinions, Brittany?
Yeah, I commented on that. I mean, I think, Brittany, you're right. It's about balance. And we know that testing is context driven. And as people have just unmuted and said, well, it depends on this project or this project. So I think you're right to talk about a balance of the two. And you said, Brittany, that in your experience, that's the context qualifier. In your experience, left was easy. In my experience, Brittany, that little thing you threw away, like, oh, it's just culture. No, it's, well, yes, try to change culture. Good luck with that, because subculture, there's something called subculture, and that will, they see culture eats strategy for breakfast. Have you heard that before? My corollary is subculture eats culture for breakfast. So you could have the best company culture in the world, and if your devs don't like testing, they won't do it. So, so I'm glad to see that you got some success with cultural influence to shifting left. I think, in my experience, shifting right is much easier because there are ways where procrastination pays off. How many of us in the room have done something immediately when our manager asked us to, and then 1 hour later they come back and go, oh yeah, never mind. I just went to a meeting. It's like, oh, I wish I had just delayed. So there is efficacy in the delay. But what I like about what you've done here, Brittany, is, first of all, you got a couple of very striking visuals that I'd like to talk to you about borrowing.
Sure.
And I think you've got it right, though. It does, you qualified it with, it's your experience. Shifting left was easier. And we do have to talk about, in any given context, what makes the most sense to do as testers, right? Where's our value most? Where is our value most in any given situation? And I think you've got some interesting things to talk about here in that respect.
Awesome.
Yeah, John, I agree with you on the culture thing, right? And so again, it all depends. Some cultures are just hard to move, right? And some cultures you come in and they're like, oh, sure, we'll do it, right? So it kind of, again, depends on which company you end up with and which culture you end up with.
And sometimes too, it's the time. Because for me, my experience has been on projects where we need to complete things in 3 months or 6 months. And the greatest impact I've had is shifting left. Or it's easy for me to just integrate myself and say, hey, include me on the planning meeting, versus let me set up the CI/CD pipeline. I mean, I don't know. I hear your point, John, and I really would love to hear more about how it was for you with the shift right.
Yeah, I think you just answered my question, because my question is more of a comment. And I think I was going to turn it into a question, but I think you just answered it. My question was going to be, okay, Brittany, how have you personally influenced shifting left? And you did say, by saying, being part of the planning process. Okay, well, we all want to be part of the planning process to some degree. On the other hand, if we're too early, like imagine if you're writing an email to someone, Brittany, and I'm over your shoulder watching every word you type. You want me to back off. Like, John, I'm not ready for you yet. Right. Yeah. But when you're ready, now I'll jump in. And that is, the timing of that is really important. You don't want to start testing if they're not ready. On the other hand, it could be like a pre-alpha, and they'll just take any feedback because they might have missed something. And that critical distance between us and development is really useful when they ask for it. If we insist on it, we're breaking culture. But it sounds like you've got a way, Brittany, where you personally have used your, I don't know, commitment or your persona to influence something that you wanted development to do. And that's good. I think that might be another talk that you should give one day, is how have you influenced development culture?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also looking for the next talk about your decision tree. I want to know more about that. But how about we go to other questions? I think we talked about the difficulty of implementation enough. So do we have any other questions in the room or online? Don't be shy.
I have one question / again comment. So with the checklist, so Spotify has their own quality engineering maturity assessment checklist. So how different is that from this? Because that's very simple as well. And then I have used it in many projects. Yeah.
I didn't know about that one. So this is
Oh,
exactly what
okay.
I wanted. I wanted to know what was out there. So I
Okay,
will check
okay.
that out
You
and
have
see
used it, right?
where,
Yeah.
yeah,
I know
if there's
about it, but I'm
Yeah.
just glad that from where?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I can send the links later, but like Spotify
Yes.
already tried this out. They had, I mean, Spotify is one company which tried all the cultural models, you know, tribes, sports, blah, blah, blah. So they did try a lot of things, how they keep up with the maturity of the quality, not testing, the quality of the team and pods. So they
Yeah.
came up with simple checklist, and they used to do these meetings where a QA would lead the meeting, but the development team would give feedbacks. How do you feel about how stable you are in production? Can you go to prod in like same day, like basic questions? And then at the end of the day, it's like red, green, orange kind of thing. And they would see this team as per their standards fit into this, you know, area. And then they would compare. And then all the QAs would get gathered together and talk about it and see how they learn from each other. So shifting culture within the teams inside an organization is a thing they have done a lot. And it has helped many companies to have the standards, like high standards, common standard of quality reporting. So
Nice.
yeah.
Okay. I'll check that one out and probably
Yeah.
use it to modify this depending on if
No,
there are any
I think
gaps.
yours is much detailed and better, I would say.
Yeah, I had
Checklist,
to do
yeah.
it like this. As you
Yeah,
guys, like I was really trying to figure out which project is good to share.
sure.
So that's why it's so detailed.
No,
Thank
this is
you.
really good. Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right, let's take one question online on the chat. How would one implement shift left when the requirements are constantly changing?
That's a good one. That happens all the time. Um, so I think this is where the mindset of like continuous improvement comes in. Um, Actually, Tatiana, let me ask you to ask the question again to make sure that I get the point.
So if the requirements are constantly changing, basically, how can we implement shift left? And to me, it's like, should we do shift left when the requirements are still changing? Or maybe it's the problem that they're always changing, you know?
Yeah, I think the problem is that they're always changing, but I don't think we can run away from it. So yeah, I think my answer to that would have to be set the baseline.
Sorry to interrupt, but I mean, this will happen all the time, right? We want to constantly change things based on what we are learning from the business, based on what we are learning from the customer. So I think, and again, there's never a answer for every case, right? But I think the shift left here applies in testing as soon as these requirements start changing, right? So you get those requirements, you get your test cases, you get your test scenarios, you gather your test data, and you work with that as development is working, because otherwise development will be doing the same thing or asking the same question, right?
Yeah.
So it's working together as soon as you find about, these new requirements or changes or whatever, and understand whether you are retiring something or you need to keep testing whatever was implemented before and then add upon of this or just modify the test, right? And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's
I
more
think you're
a
right.
moment.
Yeah, the starting point is like QA person, quality person should be still involved into the changing requirements loop as soon as it started, as soon as it gets to engineer, to product manager.
From my experience, we would have the Scrum Master meetings where we would involve QA and everybody, and then we did not start left testing until the requirements are approved. At least the specification documentation is accepted that we're covering everything that we needed to cover. then we start. If there's minor changes, then it's easier to change, but at least completed a specification.
Yeah.
It's a question of awareness. If we know that dedicated QA, it would be good to inform them even before the requirements finalized.
I think you guys all got the right answers for this.
Yeah.
I think the answer is depends.
Yeah, I think so too.
The answer is depends.
We all know how it should be.
I'm wondering if the question was more also about test automation. So like, hey, if you keep changing the product, like, can you have a stable test automation? If they meant by shift left that it's a test automation, sometimes that question comes up,
So it's
and then the answer. Go ahead.
Have AI
I was
too.
gonna say that's where the defining the critical user journeys part comes in my opinion. So that helps us to prioritize automation too. So if it's addressing what is important to the business, then you keep those kind of or you focus on test automation for those critical user journeys.
I mean, if business is changing every 3 days, I don't know. It's not only testing, like development is also shifting.
Life is changing.
So the strategy has to change.
Can prioritize.
It's
is the
true.
keyword there, right?
And then, I was gonna say too that in my experience, they usually set, maybe this is from the product manager side, where they have a MVP or we confirm what the baseline is for release. And then I try to, focus on what's supposed to go out now, but then anything that's an addition or a change is moved into phase 2. Yeah.
So Kimberly, we gave you a lot of answers. Did we answer your question?
Yes, you guys did. You guys gave me different answers. So yes, you guys did. Thank you.
Nice question.
All right. Last, yeah.
This is about test data. And probably I want to focus on your experience on the Good e-commerce project. How did you manage test data in the sense of, you mentioned of monitoring production, right? And then leveraging some of the data from production to do the testing in lower environments. So the question in there is, how did you manage the privacy? That you have access to the data for specific customers, for example.
Oh, okay.
The second part of the question would be the production environment health. If you're running some tests in production, how did you ensure that the data that you were using was kind of test data, meaning not affecting production articles in your e-commerce platform, but also that the test articles were not visible for your customers?
Yeah, those are two very good questions. The first one was in regards to test data. On the Good e-commerce project, we had a QA lead. So I was more of a junior at that time, but what I saw her do, and the team before me too, they put in place, there was a whole sanitization of the data that happened from the database. So they kept things clean that way. I'm trying to share this with you without going into the specifics of the platform because I can't give away exactly what I was doing, but they had that whole sanitization around the data that was coming in. From a security standpoint, I didn't screenshot production data and take that back into testing. What happened was I was on the call, so it was more of a collaborative effort where I met with marketing. I was a part of the heat map analysis meetings that they had to see and get the feedback there, made my notes and took that back to my test strategy and modified it there, or the test cases. There was another project that I had where we did something similar for production data, but I'm sorry, I'm not remembering this one now. I need to come back. Who asked the question?
Javier.
He will not leave you, don't worry. He will reach out to you.
I need to know because I really want to dive into it because you're giving me ideas. These are things that I did in 2021 and I did last year when I was working on my projects, but some of them aren't fresh or top of mind. But as you're asking the questions, you're making me want to write another article. note my
Yeah,
thoughts
that's okay,
down
you
so I
can
can
share
have
better.
answers to those.
The second part of the question was like, if you were testing, I probably just confirm, were you testing in production as well? And if you
Yes.
were, how did you manage, not affecting the production
Production
data?
environment. Okay, so the one that I had in mind for this most recently was like, for example, on the e-commerce project, we would have had a checkout page. We had sandbox environments set up so we would not test checkout in production all the time, but maybe for regression testing, we would do one checkout there. We tested in QA using the sandbox environments. And there were little things like we would just know not to submit forms with automation, for example. And even testing in production, the time of day that we ran the test, I mentioned they do that early in the morning. That was because it was lower risk to run it in the morning than in the middle of the day when we had a high user traffic time. So these were some of the things that we did on that project.
Hey, folks, I want to be mindful of time. Brittany, that was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. We've been so lucky to meet you, at InnovateQA and now have you speaking here.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for great questions.